Now, the 12th World Toilet Summit, the first one for Africa, have been designed to muster the individual and collective minds of all role players, including civil society, governments, educators in the fields of health, sanitation and health and human rights. Joining us now from Durban is Therese Dooley. She's a senior advisor for hygiene and sanitation at UNICEF. Therese, thank you so much for coming through to us. Of course, we know that poor sanitation and improper hygiene are the major causes of diarrhea, which has resulted in almost 1 million deaths of children under 5. How does the conference that is underway in Durban plan to address these challenging facts that have to be looked at in the context of developing countries? Therese, can you hear me?
Yes. The conference is really sort of putting the mechanism in place to actually make the communities a bit more resilient, and while actually focusing on green growth. And that combination is the main aim of the conference.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're talking about putting in place, the mechanisms to strengthen communities, what mechanisms are we talking about, given the fact that a lot of the countries where we see a lack of sanitation has very poor infrastructure?
Yeah, infrastructure is very much linked to funding, and one of the things that was started in the Durban negotiations was the Global Environmental Fund, which is now sort of termed the Green Fund, and that mechanism is put in place in terms of who's going to fund it, who's going to access it, and what are they going to access it for. Because the carbon market is a very powerful way to put a price on carbon, but it also lowers the cost of mitigation and infrastructure. So it's very important to have that type of infrastructure sort of agreed on. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the positive outcomes of Doha this time round.
Yeah. Now, of course, one can have all the money in the world and all the infrastructure in the world, but if you don't have buy-in from communities, it's very difficult for people to change their behavior. What suggestions are coming out of the conference that are targeting communities and looking specifically at how to get people to change behavior?
One of the nice things that I've actually started last year and that I continue is the Lighthouse Project. And they've got these pillars of examples where they really say this is best practice. And they had now Winners' Day from Namibia, from Uganda, from Solar Sisters. There is really effort to actually showcase best practice of things that actually happen on the ground, where there's meaningful change. So it doesn't just change the immediate, the people involved in the project, but indirectly, it also mitigates emissions, because some of the projects are transport projects, others are efficient cooking stoves, or getting cleaner water. Those type of projects are the projects that I feel that they were chosen here because of their scalability. And those are the projects that I feel that even in South Africa, we should actually sort of really look at those projects and say, how can we actually implement those projects within our own country and within our own community.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, one of the big things is the issue of money. A lot of these communities are, in fact, poor. Does this conference talk to how to get buy-in from, private sector institutions as well as governments and NGOs to try and put together the kind of resources that one actually needs to roll out the infrastructure, the campaigns targeted at behavior change and so on?
One of the things that really was discussed here is to say that you actually do need public-private partnerships. Without public-private partnerships, you won't be able to make the amount of difference that we actually do need to make. So it's not private on its own, and it's also not public on its own, but public-private partnerships. And in terms of accessing funding, that is this whole fragmented market. It was sort of, somebody described it a bit like a buffet. This is not going to be one big pot and one size fits all. This is really about what is the needs of the community. and what are the risks with the community and what should be focused on. And there's a whole range of funding mechanisms opening up for South Africa via the normal CDM route, via the verified emission reduction route, the VCS route, but also now increasingly via bilateral agreements with Japan. There is really exciting developing mechanisms for developing for projects in South Africa.